Welcome to the Tavern, my brave summoner. Would you like to take a break from your heroics and immerse yourself in a world of mystery? Then listen to my story. In the depths of Runterra, where the shadows hide their secrets, there is a power that frightens even the most experienced wizards. This is shadow magic, a dark and unknown force that can distort reality and plunge the world into eternal night. The most terrifying symbol of this power is a creature whose name is whispered, Nocturne. Who is it? Where does it come from? And why is its name so terrifying? Let us try to solve these mysteries together. Choose a comfortable spot, get yourself a mug of strong ale, and I will tell you a story that will make your blood run cold.
The light is fading.
At the end of the Rune Wars, groups of war mages tried to snatch victory from each other, clinging to every advantage. The chronicles are silent as to who was the first to renounce the flesh and enter the realm of the spirits, but it is known that recently they began to pursue each other not only on the battlefield, but also in another dimension born of unconscious thoughts and feelings. Unbound by the laws of the material world, they fought battles incomprehensible to the average mind. The darkness touched the minds of mortals all over the world. It conquered the will and infiltrated their dreams, day and night, bringing nameless fear and driving some to commit more heinous crimes against their fellows. For some, the night became endless. Some did not close their eyes and plunged into the abyss of madness. Others returned from the dream world in a cold sweat, screaming in terror, and recovered for a long time, trying to forget the horrible visions. Still others died in their sleep. One such story happened to an ordinary family in Piltover. The head of the family, named Selwyn, after reading a bedtime story to his son Abel, leaned over to kiss the boy on the forehead, but Abel suddenly pressed himself against the pillow. The father thought the boy was shy because he was too grown for goodnight kisses, and the man smiled. But suddenly Selwyn didn't feel like laughing, and a shiver ran down his spine. Abel was sinking deeper into the bed. The boy was literally drowning in it, as if a sinkhole had opened under the mattress. The sheets wrapped around his body. Abel screamed. The sheet became wet and shiny, turning into something resembling a red spotted tongue. Selwyn shook himself from his stupor and reached for his son, trying to grab him and pull him out, but the giant tongue only squeezed Abel's body tighter, pulling the boy down. The edges of the bed broke with a loud crack. Uneven pieces of wood turned into sharp yellow fangs. The entire frame became a giant, hideous maw that was about to swallow Abel. Curls of black fog floated out of the child's mouth and nose and began to swirl around the ceiling like harbingers of a terrible storm. The bed mouth moved its jaws, opening wider and letting out a deafening, heart-wrenching scream. The jaws closed. Selwyn jerked upright on the bed, gulping and gasping greedily for air and rubbing his sweaty face with his palms. He looked around, but there was nothing in the dark room. It had just struck midnight in Piltover, and the lights of the city below were barely visible through the thick curtains. After a while, his heart stopped pounding like crazy and his thoughts began to settle. Selwyn could not remember the last time he had a nightmare, let alone one this vivid. His mind returned to his son. The father wanted to quietly check on Abel and see if he was okay. Suddenly he heard a voice say, "Dad?" The sound of his son's voice made Selwyn shudder. His eyes were slowly adjusting to the darkness, so he could only make out the small silhouette of his son at the foot of the bed. Selwyn could only dimly see his face, for the curtains were closed, but he did not remember pulling them that way. The boy turned to him again and said, "Why did you dream that dream? Don't you know it feeds on that?" Selwyn felt a chill run through him. He glanced over Abel's head and saw a long shadow on the wall. It was clearly not his son casting it. Abel shrank back and merged with the shadow. The little boy was no more. He had disappeared into the darkness. Selwyn reached out for him, but all he saw was a curl of black mist flying from his lips, just as in his nightmare. With a wet, seething hiss, the shadow began to pull away from the wall. Selwyn, paralyzed with fear, watched helplessly. The reanimated shadow only vaguely resembled a human and tapered downward like a blade stuck on the ground. Waves rippled along the ghostly body as if Selwyn were looking at him through a thick layer of black water. A pair of cold eyes stared back at him, piercing his very soul. Selwyn felt a rush of adrenaline, an animal instinct to save his life. But while his body wanted to run, His mind betrayed him. Stunned, he could only stare at the creature he was sure only existed in fairy tales passed down from father to son. It was a monster, a real monster. It moved closer, looming over Selwyn. Blue-black drops fell from its contours, dissolving in the night's darkness like ink in the sea. The monster's arms were outstretched, and horrible, broad blades grew above the claws. Selwyn turned pale, unable to tear his eyes away from the nightmare creature as it brought its muzzle closer to his face. In the low whisper of a drowning man being dragged into the depths of hopeless darkness, it answered Selwyn's question. Just a few words before it plunged the blades into the heart. It was dawn. Life in the vast trading city was in full swing. Sunlight poured into every window on every street, including Selwyn's bedroom. A child's fist knocked softly on the bedroom door. The handle turned slowly and the door opened a small crack into which Abel peered. The boy opened the door wider and stepped into the room. The shadows scattered into the corners, hiding from the morning light, but for some reason slower than usual, as if reluctant. Abel looked around. He was getting scared. His father was nowhere to be found. The bedroom was completely empty, but the boy could not shake the feeling that someone was watching him from the darkest corner. He coughed, but did not notice the cloud of mist that came out of his mouth. Then Abel left, closing the door behind him. So it is not known for certain whether Nocturne was born out of human suffering, or whether they turned one of the mage-created killers into a monster. All that can be said for certain is that the resulting ghostly creature was unspeakably terrifying. The concepts of honor, nobility, and kindness were completely foreign to Nocturne. It itself was the embodiment of fear, unable to control itself. In the spirit world, this demonic creature screamed at the reckless magicians who had created it, hoping to end its own suffering. It was in pain, and pain bred cruelty. However, it quickly tasted human fear. In the otherworldly dimension, time meant almost nothing, but Nocturne prolonged its stalk each time to savor the terror of its victim before cutting the silver thread of their lives in the flesh. Soon, no one dared to enter Nocturne's territory. Who knows how the Rune Wars would have ended had it not been for the demon beyond the earthly boundary. All that is known is that after the war, what little information there was about shadow magic was hidden, and its practice was banned in many lands under penalty of death. Imprisoned in a spirit world where almost no one entered, Nocturne began to starve. Only occasionally did mortals slip through the worlds in their dreams to feed it. There was nothing compared to the former feasts of fear. Through magical currents, it reached the border of two worlds where sweet dreams easily turned to nightmares and found a way to enter the waking world. Nocturne became a shadow with glowing eyes, an ominous reflection of the primal fears of Runterra's many races. Whether in a crowded city or in the wastelands, the demon finds the weak of spirit, whether a mighty ruler or a penniless peasant, and fills their hearts with deadly terror and endless darkness. Many decades ago, in a faraway land called Demacia, where the laws were firm, there was a legend of a man named Fossian Crownguard. The brave warrior, the great-great-grandfather of Garen and Lux, defeated the monster that plagued Runterra. His grave stands where Fossian fought a deadly battle with the darkness. A marble tablet, intricately carved by a skilled hand, tells the story of his legendary deed. In a fierce battle with the monster Nocturne, Fossian, armed with a Demacian sword, pierced the creature's black heart, sending it into the abyss of darkness. In the memory of the brave warrior, a city named in his honor, Fosbarrow, was built at the foot of the mound. Every stone of this town, every breath of its inhabitants holds the mystery of Fossian's deeds, his courage and his unbreakable spirit, which have become a symbol of resilience. Many years have passed since horror and heroism intertwined in a fateful battle, and now, 80 winters later, young Lux, Fossian's great-great-granddaughter, has heard whispers of the magic that enveloped the forests and cliffs of Fosbarrow. Time has not erased the deeds of her legendary ancestors, but has shrouded them in mystery. And now Lux, bathed in the glory of the Crownguard family, feels the magic of Fosbarrow calling to her. In the darkness of night, Lux stepped onto the threshold of Fosbarrow. From her first steps into the city, she was enveloped in an icy darkness, as if someone was watching her from the shadows. At the Illuminator's temple, Lux learned from Mrs. Pernil of the kidnapping of Luca, Magistrate Giselle's son, by a dark sorcerer. At dawn, Lux saddled her horse and rode into the forest in search of the source of the evil. Deep in the forest, risking everything, she called upon her magic to hear the light. The thought of darkness engulfing Demacia terrified Lux. The girl's breath got caught in her throat as if an invisible hand had grabbed her by the throat, and she felt dizzy. Her eyelids grew heavy and began to droop as if some force was putting her to sleep. A sudden sound woke her. The leaves parted to reveal 5 riders, one of whom was her brother Garen. They returned to Foss Barrow with nothing. The magistrate's son was not found and fear gripped the town. In the marketplace, Lux witnesses the trial of an unfortunate man accused of murdering his family and aiding a dark sorcerer. The man's words about monsters and the darkness in humans made Lux suspicious. Garen stood at the podium, his movements radiating unbreakable confidence. The silver blade emerged from its sheath with a barely audible hiss, cutting through the tense silence. At the last moment, as her brother drew his sword, the convict whispered words that sounded like a curse in Lux's soul. The light is fading. A powerful blow severed the prisoner's head to the cheers of the crowd. The hapless man fell to the platform. His head rolled back and a stream of blood spurted from his neck, followed by smoke, similar to a black liquid oozing from a burial pit. The sudden appearance of the specter frightened everyone. Lux fell to her knees, terrified and premonitory. Terrible visions flashed through her mind. A lonely grave, exiled from her home, eternal torment. Was that the voice of the prophet, or was it just a play of her imagination? The answers to these questions were hidden in the foggy mists of the future. The people of Foss Barrow fell to the ground one by one as if life had just been drained from their bodies. Lux opened her mouth in amazement as black smoke rose from the unconscious inhabitants and took shape. Each monster was different, defying any clear description. Lux called to her trusty horse with a sharp whistle. Turning to Garen, she nodded and said she knew how to stop this madness. Her eyes shone with determination, though they trembled with the anticipation of the unknown. The girl made her way to her great-great-grandfather Fossian's grave. A horse, Starfire, froze before a clearing shrouded in shadow. Fossian's tomb is the source of evil, but the horse refuses to go any further. Lux steps onto the ominous ground. A stone mound rises before her. It stopped resembling a sinister crown. Dark smoke swirling in the sky hid the images of ancient monsters. Luca sat in front of her, his shadow lengthened by the moonlight and lying on the ground like a dark veil. His eyes, once full of youthful enthusiasm, were now bottomless pits of cold emptiness. The shadow's tentacles wrapped around him like a suffocating web. Lux approached, her heart pounding in time to the deadly dance. Her hand reached for her dagger, the blade cold against her palm. Luca nodded, his voice a ghostly whisper in the night stillness. Your nightmares will be mine. The girl realized immediately that the demon Nocturne imprisoned in the tomb was not dead. It was sleeping, healing its wounds and preparing itself. She could not move, as if dug into the ground. The shadow that bore the outline of Luca laughed, and the sound pierced her bones. Its touch chilled her body like ice, but deep inside she felt a flash of anger. Screaming in pain, the brave girl threw her dagger at the boy. She had no intention of hurting Luca. She just wanted the metal to touch him and transmit a bit of her light. Her arms and legs burned, and her movements were clumsy. The boy jumped back, but it was too slow for him. The blade of the dagger scratched his cheek. Even that fleeting touch was enough. Lux's light poured into Luca and the clearing exploded in a blinding glow. There was a fierce and desperate howl as the creature was literally expelled from the boy's body. Pure white flames enveloped Luca, consuming everything around him. In front of Lux, the boy sat down, wrapping his arms around his knees. He lifted his head and looked at her with the eyes of a frightened child. The meadow, which had just been filled with darkness and sinister power, now looked peaceful and serene. The green grass shone in the sun, and the old oaks cast long shadows on the ground. The hill with the stone pyramid looked like an ordinary hill, and the inscription on the tablet, faded by time, spoke of Fossian's glorious deeds. A feeling of relief filled Lux's soul. She realized she had won. Nocturne, the one hiding in the shadows, no longer had power over this place. The darkness retreated, leaving only memories of terror. My brave summoner, I hope my story has not frightened you too much. As you can see, even in the darkest of times, the light wins. Though who knows if the mighty Nocturne is lurking somewhere in the shadows, ready to strike terror across Runterra once again. But don't be discouraged though, for it is in such unknown tales that the true magic lies, and as a faithful storyteller, I am always ready to share the new League of Legends adventures with you. If this story has touched your soul, please leave your mark, warm words in the comments, and a like for this story. Better yet, do visit my tavern more often. Together we will discover new pages in the history of this amazing world. Do share your impressions and favorite champions with me. After all, you are my muse, inspiring me to write new stories. Thank you for being with me. See you soon in my tavern, where there will always be room for you and a mug of hot ale as we delve deeper into the League of Legends universe together.